have my own consulting business, Beyond Social Buzz, based in Muswell Hill. And I have spent the last 8 years working with startups and a variety of businesses, helping them to get better results out of social media. Apart from my consultancy work, I also deliver training, social media training for a variety of organizations and some wonderful charities like Work Avenue, as well as universities and tech schools. I have also been involved in Facebook She Means Business campaign for the last 3 years. I'm their official trainer, and the campaign helps female founders grow their businesses through Facebook and Instagram in particular. So 8 years of my life has been spent on social media marketing, and that's a lot of hours spent online, as you might imagine. And from as long as I remember, I was always interested in the link between our use of technology, our behaviors on social media, which can be very interesting. And I'm sure you could share a lot of your own experiences in that respect with me, and I hope we'll have a chance to do it post the talk. And the link between technology and social media and well-being fascinated me. Hence, over the last 2 years, I started delivering more seminars and workshops on digital well-being. And then a year ago, I started psychotherapy training because I would like to understand the mind a little bit better and hopefully bring the two together. So the aim of today's session is really to make space for reflection and take a closer look at our habits when we use social media, when we interact with technology. And technology, of course, it's more important than ever, especially over the last few months. We have experienced that. But of course, it also led to a situation where our anxiety was heightened, a lot of time spent online, and often our phones became our constant companions. So today I'll be sharing with you a variety of research, some statistics, all to do with finding a better balance in our digital life. I wish I could call myself a master of digital balance, but it's definitely a journey, something I'm working on personally. So today's session is not about preaching. So I struggle with things myself. That's why I'll really like to invite a conversation post-session. Some of it might resonate more with you. Some of it you might think, I definitely recognize this situation and it's familiar with me. Some of it might resonate less. And this is because we are very different individuals, and digital balance for one person will mean something very different to another person. And it's important for us to share different opinions, and I encourage those. My aim is not to criticize technology. Technology is absolutely miraculous. I think, all can admit that. But it's more about making space for reflection and making a pause and creating awareness, because awareness is a good start for us to reflect and hopefully find ways for creating better habits. Okay, so let me start with the question. So my question for you is, have I got your full attention? Well, probably not. And the reason why is because, according to research, that's something that we are increasingly struggling with. For 24 hours a day, as you know very well, we are bombarded with streams of information and misinformation, notifications, instant messaging, WhatsApp. I mean, the list is so long, and it makes it incredibly difficult for us to focus. So now, why do we find it so irresistible? Why there is this enormous urge to check your phone? Well, while the geographical landscape of our species have changed, with fewer threatening features, so there are no dinosaurs trying to eat us anymore, our primitive instincts persist, and we still have the same primitive human impulses to respond to immediate opportunities and threats. This is the way we are wired as human beings. And that's exactly what makes it so hard for us to often resist those technological urges. So let's take a closer look at the value of our attention. So I would like to introduce you to this guy. His name is Herbert A. Simon. He was an American psychologist, economist, and Nobel laureate. And Simon was the person who first introduced the term attention economy. And he described human attention as a bottleneck of human thought that has a limiting effect on what we can perceive and what we can do in a stimulating environment. In other words, simplifying all this, when you pay attention to one thing, you ignore something else. And the expression pay attention in itself is very interesting because it suggests an exchange, a little bit similar to money, and it implies two things. It implies the fact that your attention is limited in its capacity and that it's valuable. Attention is currency. And you are now paying attention to my talk, ignoring some other work that perhaps you need to do. Sorry for bringing this up, but I think that's a good example. So we are now paying attention to one thing, and actually we cannot do another thing simultaneously. So here Simon, very importantly, and 40 years ago, that's no news, that's a very old discovery, completely debunked the myth of multitasking. We cannot fully attend to multiple things simultaneously. So when we think about attention and information and the link to digital age, in the past, our access to information was limited, education was obviously luxury, and now we have access to information on massive scale. And yet we have the same amount of cognitive power, of the same mental processing power as we've always had. The number of hours or minutes in your day hasn't changed either. We still only have 24 hours in our day. So today, the attention and not information is a limiting factor. And there is someone else I would like to introduce to you. So Michael Goldhaber, he is now in his 80s. And I think we could describe him as an internet prophet that you have never heard of. I'm in absolute awe of Goldhaber, and I have read quite a few things that he has written, and he's still being interviewed currently, actually. So there are a few publications I'm sure you can find his wisdom out there. So Goldhaber pointed out and predicted, if you wish, that's in the 90s, so long before social media came to place, that the economy will change. It will change from a material-based economy into information-based economy. And he also highlighted in the early 90s that going forward, a lot of online services will be offered for free. In his genius way, in 2006, that's months before Facebook actually launched, he talked about an incredible impact of technology on human lives. And he also said that the technology will reward those who are best at commanding attention. And this is a phrase that he coined, which I think is very poignant. So fast forward to today. In January 2020, there was a meeting of US Congress that you can also find online, very interesting meeting about digital technology and how this field should be regulated. And there was a guy called Tristan Harris. He's a very interesting man. He's a developer, he's a computer scientist, he's somebody who's worked for Google for many years, and he also worked very closely with people who started Instagram. That's before Instagram was bought by Facebook. And Tristan Harris basically also became a whistleblower. He was one of the first people who started uncovering the way those platforms were built. So he was one of the first people who started saying and actually challenging tech companies, saying, there is a moral obligation, there is an ethical obligation on us to start talking to users about their behaviors and why certain things happen and how these platforms were built, and basically creating awareness. As you can imagine, did go down very well with tech companies, and he's now a lone rider, and he's doing some incredible things. He's got his own charity organization where he is raising awareness. So during this Congress meeting, US Congress meeting from January 2020, he asked two interesting questions, among other things. It's a long talk. He says, how much have you paid for your Facebook last month? Or how much have you paid for watching YouTube? Well, nothing. It's free. And yet he made a point. These companies are worth a lot of money, and altogether, I think it's like $1 trillion a market value. So he basically pointed to the fact that our attention is being monetized. So the idea of many apps and uh, technological inventions out there is to take away our attention and to make you spend time with apps for much longer than you initially intended. And this links to something that in social media marketing we talk about very often, which is called platform dependency. So when it comes to platform dependency, it's basically the time that you spend with particular app. And that's also something that social media companies compete against each other for. So for example, for Facebook, it's 40 minutes a day on average per person. For Instagram, it's around 30 minutes. So you can do your maths and, add roughly what's present in your life. And obviously it will differ from person to person, but these are sort of average statistics. And I'm sure you've been there before. It happens to me all the time when I'm trying to check the weather and I go to my phone and then I find myself on Instagram and 10 minutes later I'm scrolling mindlessly and I still don't know whether I need an umbrella or not. So, I think that happens to us a lot. And I'm not saying that these apps were invented to turn us into addicts. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think that it's important for us to acknowledge that there is this constant fight for our attention and constant competition for our attention. So there are a few mechanisms on different websites that I think we should be aware of. And all of these aim for you to stay engaged for longer than you ever wanted. So one, of course, likes. I'm sure you have heard and read about it hundreds of times now. So likes actually were not introduced to Facebook initially. So when Facebook was launched, likes didn't exist. Facebook mainly, the purpose was for keeping in touch with your uni friends and then seeing what they are up to. And then likes came to place. And it shifted a lot. So basically what happened, of course, what was introduced was the need for validation, the need for social acceptance, and of course, the urge to go and check what's happening. How many people approved of my post? How many people are thinking of me? Then the other thing that's actually quite interesting, I think, is the fact that in today's era, technology, news never ends. The news is absolutely bottomless. So when you think about the way your granddad perhaps acquired news, he would open a newspaper on Sunday afternoon, go through every page, get to the last page, he would close it and he would put it aside. So there would be so-called stopping queue. But the way online news and news today work, that there is no stopping queues. So you can find yourself going on forever. And of course, in times when our anxiety might be heightened, we are trying to make sure that we are staying up to date. And obviously that can leave you absolutely exhausted. Also, we have some interesting browsing habits or surfing habits. So apparently every single one of us has about 20 websites that we visit every day. I don't know what it is for you, maybe different things. BBC, maybe The Guardian, maybe Amazon, whatever that is. And apparently we have 20 of those on average. And every day in circles, we go through those. And of course, the way we work, 40 tabs open, why not? It's there. And we start this surfing circle from one platform to another. So the question here is how many hours we could save in our day and be productive if we were a little bit more aware of what we are actually doing with our time. Autoplaying videos, another interesting thing. You log into Facebook, you see a video, you see emotion, and your eye is attracted and drawn to it. And somehow you stay with the video. You had never any intention of watching that video. What's interesting is also that very often another video rolls straight after. Unskippable ads anyway, I'm sure you know about those. On YouTube, you want to watch a specific video on YouTube, and there is this 5 seconds that you have to bear with before you can skip. And this is also another interesting technique where it's called a mere exposure effect, where you see something for a very short time, and although you reject it, it's stored in your unconscious. So when you see it the second time, it comes across familiar. And familiarity breeds trust. And then you think, oh, I've seen it somewhere before. So you might have a bias to actually choosing one product over another just because you saw it for a split second. Finally, typing bubbles on messaging apps, they can drive us crazy sometimes because people start and stop and start and stop. And, is this a useful tool? Is it a tool for keeping you engaged for longer? Is it a tool that perhaps might incite anxiety? So lots of interesting questions here. And hence, I guess here my question would be, what can we demand from technology companies, from app developers? Wouldn't it be better if some of those apps were serving a specific purpose and not adding all the other distraction? So to give you an example, one of the apps I really like and use is the app called iNaturalist. So it's an app for scanning plants. So I like my plants, so you can scan a plant and basically find out more about it and other things. But basically, there is nothing else. There is no other distraction. Another interesting app founded by a client of mine is called Urbanizer. So it's an app, urbanizer app, that helps you to discover cities, not now, of course, by bookmarking places of interest, restaurants, viewing points, walks, and there is nothing else. So you can ask friends for suggestions, but there is no other distraction. You are literally going to this app for a specific purpose. So I guess some food for thought here, and whether those apps will be changing going forward. Last word on a personal level, there is a very interesting piece of research out there about the presence of phones in our lives. So it has been now proven that a phone within a room where you are with another person, if the phone is within your eyesight, your capacity to focus, your capacity to concentrate, but most importantly, your capacity to experience empathy towards another person is limited. So I think that's an interesting finding, and I'm sure you know on work level that a lot of companies banned use of phones during meetings, during work meetings, for a very good reason. So the gift of attention, of course, in our private lives, it's, I think, one of the most precious gifts we can gift to somebody else. It's very difficult to gift that gift if our eyes are glued to devices. And the possibility, I think, of giving someone your undivided attention, even just for a few minutes, might help someone reconsider, for example, the belief that nobody cares. Or equally with kids, if you work with kids or if you have kids, I'm sure you have seen the magic of giving attention, full attention, complete, no distraction, eye contact, what happens with kids and how they flourish and how they open up. So with temptations of digital distraction, you might be pulled away from something that is very important by something that is very superficial.
Joanna, somebody just said, could you please repeat the plant app name?
Ah, of course. The app is called iNaturalist.
So I, as in,
As yeah, so I for India, and
yeah,
then naturalist. I'm very happy to send you a link later. But this is just an example of an app that doesn't distract us and actually delivers what it's supposed to deliver.
thanks, Joanna. Thanks.
I'm glad you're getting interested in that. Plants are good for our well-being, apparently. Okay, so moving on, I have some other facts for you. So I wonder whether you know what nomophobia is. If there is somebody in the room who knows what nomophobia is, then I would love to hear from them. Okay,
Not
so
too many reactions,
not,
so
not too many reactions. Okay, so
doesn't.
apparently, any reactions? No? You have time to Google it. Okay, so nomophobia is something that apparently more than half of our population suffers from, and that's a fear of being without your phone.
Mm.
I can see it happening in my home. So when my younger son was 3, whenever I looked for my phone and I looked for it frantically, he would always run with the phone to me and say, "Mommy, your phone is here." And that would be that moment of awareness for me. He knows how much this thing matters to me. Unbelievable. So apparently, more than half of us in the UK, adults, suffer from nomophobia. So the fear of being without the phone, losing the phone, battery going down, the loss of signal. And apparently, in some cases, it can bring symptoms similar to withdrawal syndrome. And then us checking our phones. I wonder whether you have any idea how many times per day we check our phones. So statistics differ. Some statistics say 85 times a day. That's pre-COVID, by the way. Some statistics say 200 times a day. But an important study by Oxfam kind of settled in 2018 on average 12 minutes. So I think that's quite a lot. So going back to attention and how many hours are in your day. So, technology has progressed so much, and yet we still have a certain amount of minutes in the day and certain amount of hours in the day, certain amount of cognitive ability to give to tasks. This is a very interesting graph that was developed by an American guy called Professor Adam Alter. He's a professor of psychology and marketing at New York University. And of course, it is pre-COVID again. The last findings are from 2017, but it was very poignant for me when I came across it about 2 years ago. So what Alter did, he has looked at a 24-hour day. What our 24-hour day looks like, that's a working day. And he's looking at three different pauses in time. So he looks at 2007, 2015, and 2017. Just to give you some context here, iPads were introduced in 2010. And what he says is that actually how we spend our working days haven't changed very much. So he says that roughly we spend 7 to 8 or 8.5 days on sleep, and then we have 8 to 9 days on work. Apparently not longer relevant in terms of our work. Apparently 2 hours of work were added during COVID. But anyway, pre-COVID, we have 8 hours on sleep, 8 to 9 hours on work. Then we have something called survival activities. That's the blue bracket, which is you preparing meals, tidying up, looking after your kids, bathing. And then you have the red little stripe, that's your screen time in 2007. And then you have the white box. And the white box is something I really want to talk to you about. This white space is your personal time. And this time is incredibly important to us. This is when you do things that make us individuals. This is the time you spend on your hobbies. This is when you get creative. This is the time when you spend time with your loved ones, build relationships. This is also the time when you reflect on your life and where is it going and the meaning of it. And also apparently that when we get older and we reflect back on our life, this is the time that we memorize the most. That's the time that matters most. So this place is sacred in a way. So now, how much time is being taken by screens? So in 2007, that much tiny stripe. In 2015, a little bit more. Then we have 2017, a big bracket of screen time in red. And then we have a tiny, tiny yellow stripe shrinking. Our personal time when we get in touch with ourselves is becoming very minimal. So to give you some statistics from the UK, data from Ofcom 2018, apparently 3 hours were spent online. That's outside from work completely. Apart from work, we would apparently spend 3 hours online shopping, social media, news, etc. When the first lockdown was introduced in April 2020, this time grew to 4 hours, over 4 hours. The Times also they published an article that I found quite alarming, and I'm finding it hard to believe, but gosh, maybe that's true. So in August 2020, they said that our time spent online with screens apart from work is around 6 hours. So I was just thinking it's almost another full working day. I mean, when do we sleep? So I think it's worth to consider those things. So of course, this all will differ from person to person. Some of it might not appeal at all, but I think that this graph proves that if we'll be spending more and more time with technology and on screens, we have very little time left for humanity. Okay, so what can we do about it? What can we do to make it better? So I have picked some of my tips for you, and again, this is open for discussion. I'll tell you what works for me and what seems to make a difference. So monotasking and time blocking. There is a lot of productivity experts who talk about both techniques. There is a lot out there that you can find about those techniques. So constant stream of notifications, we spoke about it enough today, but all this bombarding us with notifications and technological stimulus means that our productivity but also our ability to focus and work on tasks that require concentration or analytical input is very limited. Also, for those of you that write blogs, those of you who are writers, you know that for writing, for creative writing, we need attention. So it's almost about creating this sort of tight bubble of focus, as some of productivity experts refer to that. How can we do it? It's important because we know that when we are being constantly distracted, so you are working on something and then an email box pops up in the right corner and somebody WhatsApps you, every time you redirect your attention to your phone, for example, or to your email, it takes you, depending on the person, up to 25 minutes to regain the same level of focus that you've had before you got distracted. Also, overall, apparently it takes us up to 40% longer to complete tasks if we keep being distracted. So loss of time, effectively, loss of productivity. So it definitely goes back to the myth of multitasking. Multitasking is killing our productivity, that's for sure. So today, if you can carve out 2 hours of undistracted time, it makes you a superhero. 2 hours of undistracted time for work. But of course, there is lockdown as well, and I completely get all that. But I think still worth thinking about. So how could we consider monotasking? Could we consider allocating time to a specific task, creating a pocket of time and saying to yourself, I'm giving myself 40 minutes or 30 minutes. And I'm sure there will be different ideas as well, because I have read about making those pockets quite tight. So the longer we allow for a task, the more time it will take. It's a bit like a woman's handbag, you know, the more things you put there, the more things can fit there. So keeping it tight, keeping it quite defined in terms of time, notifications off, if possible, timer on, one task. Or blocking time. So time blocking is something that's being discussed more and more as well. So creating a time where there are no meetings. This is time for you to go into the deep work and really focus. So some ideas here for you. So I would like to talk to you about your mornings as well, and what happens when you wake up. So that would be my another message for you. So I'm sure you have heard about the impact of blue light. So the light that's emitted by iPads and phones. And the blue light impacts the production of melatonin in our life, in our body. So basically, the melatonin is the hormone that helps you to regulate your sleep-awake cycle. And reducing melatonin levels means that it makes it harder for us to fall asleep and to stay asleep. Also with kids, for example, blue light, so devices, a lot of research claims minimum 30 minutes to an hour, no screen time before bed, because it stimulates them again and it makes it harder for them to fall asleep. So we know that for sure in terms of blue light and falling asleep. And of course, poor sleep means, you know,
Sorry, I'm gonna
less
take this
resilience,
off. Let me just make it.
less resilience, and us becoming more prone to anxiety and depression. So loads of different things here. So blue light aside, why mornings are so important. So I wonder how many of you have checked your phone straight after waking up. And I also wonder what you've done when you've checked your phone. Have you checked the news? Maybe you've checked social media. Maybe you've checked your email long before you started working. Well, apparently 60 to 80% of us do exactly that. The thing about our mornings is our mornings are golden. Our mornings are a mark of a new beginning. When you wake up, you are full of your cognitive ability. The researchers refer to it as cognitive bandwidth. So your ability to process information, to learn, to focus, and then you check your phone. Or even worse, you check your work email. And then if that's the first activity in the day, then some of your potential is left on that screen. But what's even worse is you are in a reactionary state. So my encouragement to you is to start your day on your own terms and focus on projects and intentions that matter to you. So before you look at the emails and before You look at notifications and your mind will be taken away to other things and annoyed or overstimulated or feeling of pressure. Before you do all that, it would be great if you could ask yourself a question: what do I want to achieve today? Or maybe set an intention. This is what I want to do today. This is what I want to achieve today. Before you let in all the noise. I think the idea of starting small is a good idea. And there are some suggestions I have for you. Again, they might not be relevant, they might not resonate, but these are some suggestions that worked for me. So maybe charging your phone away from your bed, maybe in a corner of the room, maybe replacing your phone with a book that makes you feel really good. So if you wake up and maybe you wake up at night and you happen to open it wherever, you know that it will enrich you and it will make you feel good. Maybe it's about waking 30 minutes earlier, because I'm sure some of you will say, what are you talking about? I've got orders coming through my email in the morning. I need to tend to those. I get all that. Maybe it's waking about a little bit earlier, having a coffee with yourself. How am I feeling today? What do I want? How do I want to? What do I want to get out of my to-do list today? What matters to me most? What are my priorities? Maybe it's about starting your day from a morning meditation, opening your window, breathing fresh air, doing some breathing exercises. Maybe it's about going for a run. So different things will work for different people. And finally, I would like to talk to you about intentions. I definitely believe that awareness makes a very big difference here, because otherwise we can behave on autopilot. We can run our life on autopilot, like those surfing habits I told you about, the 20 websites that we apparently go through in our day on average. So developing awareness. What am I doing? Why am I going there? How is it making me feel? So check in with yourself. Some people promote digital detox, so I don't criticize at all. Again, different things work for different people. I think it's a great idea. Personally, I believe that something else is needed. I think what we need to do is to develop awareness and develop intentions. How do I want technology to serve me? And it's very important for a healthy relationship for technology is to make a relationship that's informed. So you are making decisions instead of the technology driving your reactions. So habit, of course, as you know, it's a repetitive behavior. We can shape those habits. So what if you challenge your habits? What if you check on yourself and say, exactly as I said earlier, why am I going there? What's the purpose? What am I getting out of it? And draw your attention to feelings. If you are feeling a little bit anxious, worried, and then you might be checking social media straight after, will it make me feel better? How am I feeling? Am I feeling a little bit vulnerable? So I think attention and awareness. So I believe that it's more about setting your purpose and values around how you want to use technology. It's a little bit like dieting. I don't know about you, but if I promise myself to go on a diet, I immediately look for chocolate, like literally within 2 hours. I'm thinking I need to know where it is in the house, just in case. It's ridiculous. So I think there is something about very drastic measures. For me, it doesn't agree with me. So when people, for example, live a healthy lifestyle, very often they commit to something more like values or plant-based or whatever that is. They believe in something more. So it would be great if you could start believing, if we could start thinking about something more in terms of technology. How is it taking me closer to my purpose? How is it helping me to get where I want to be, as opposed to this driving my reactions? This really is the last tip. So I would like to encourage you to make time for silence. And silence is completely underrated in today's world. It's uh, doesn't have the best press for some reason. I don't know why. And silence is so important when it's chosen consciously, not when it's imposed on us. That's a very important thing to acknowledge here, especially because of lockdowns. So switching off is very important for you to get in touch with your own emotions, with your body. How is my body feeling? And also to boost your productivity and your focus. I have to warn you here, it's not easy to be in silence, even if it's 10 or 20 minutes, because we often use technology to introduce noise and not to address certain things. So I completely get that. It's sometimes easier like that, but silence shouldn't be avoided. Neuroscience claims endless benefits of silence. Apparently, it has fantastic nourishing effect on our brains. It's also absolute essential ingredient for flow. So to get into a deeper levels of working, being more creative, being more focused. And apparently, a lot of famous people like Edison, Newton, Einstein, they spent a lot of time working in silence, but also in solitude. Careful of the word solitude here because we have been isolated for so long now. So it's difficult to think about solitude as something that we can actually opt for voluntarily. But I will leave this reflection with you. I really like this quote um, from Peter Bergman. So he is an author and a productivity coach. And finally, bringing it back and making a full circle, what is digital well-being? So that's what we were looking at today. The term is still very new. It's only about 10 to 11 years old. And there are loads of different definitions. A lot of them point to our well-being, physical and mental, and impact of technology. But I thought that was also a good definition from Google. Make sure that the technology serves you and you are not. That's my interpretation of this definition. You're not a slave to technology. So how is technology bringing you closer to your goals? So creating awareness and making space for reflection. So that's all from me for today. Thank you very much for joining this session. I really appreciate your company today. There's quite a few today of you on the line, and I would really love to hear from you. So I know that Joe will open the floor very soon for questions and for discussion. I would love to hear different points of view. I enjoy when people disagree with me, so I would love to hear your thoughts, variety of thoughts. We are all different individuals, and digital balance will be very different for all of us. Um, I run those workshops and seminars on well-being for organizations. So if you think that's something that will benefit your organization or a charity that you support, please get in touch. Equally, if there were things that resonated or maybe come to you later and you have some thoughts, please do connect with me on LinkedIn under Joanna Michaels and on my Instagram under Beyond Social Buzz. I would love to continue this conversation. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Suzanne just said, please can you re-show, Suzanne, I'm not sure, Suzanne Musikant, which I'm not sure, please re-show the slide before digital well-being. I don't know exactly which slide you're talking about, so maybe
Okay.
you let us know.
Would that be this one, Suzanne?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So thank you. Really good, a really interesting presentation, Joanna. And there's some questions coming. Some questions coming in. In fact, Sarah Russell said, which is interesting, whilst we're listening, we're not as focused as we are seeing slides and messages are popping up on the chat from other participants. So that's also, you know, even on today's Zoom, we can be, and there was another, somebody said,
there's no escaping.
No escaping. Please re-show the other quote, second or third before the last one. So maybe, I think there was another quote that you had.
Of course. So the quote comes from a book on silence by a Buddhist monk. And the book was published about 3 or 4 years ago. That's the book I have on my bedside table. It's full of fantastic knowledge about life, nothing to do with religion. It's literally about us making time for silence, but also paying attention to things that are important to us. So I love how all these different people across the world, you know, people like the scientists and then the economists and people like Michael Goldhaber and then this guy whose name I cannot pronounce, they all effectively, these messages are linked and there are people making noise about it, but unfortunately they are not always heard.
Thank you. So if you want to go off share, I've got some questions. One question which came in from Nina Vancliffe is, how much time ideally should you allow for each category? Nina, I don't know, maybe you want to just unmute yourself and let us know by what you mean by which category, or just write in the chat in your day.
Basically the 4 categories: the sleep, the personal, the one that was about me, and work and balance.
Oh, you mean
so like within a 24-hour,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
It's a good question, Nina, and thanks so much for raising it. Again, I think, you know, it'd be different for all of us. Of course, there are some guidelines in terms of our health and in terms of our sleep. So there, I think 8 hours or 7 hours is considered a good amount of time for an adult. But I'm sure some people would argue, because apparently as we grow older, we need less sleep for some reason. If we have kids, when we don't have them waking us up anymore, apparently we don't sleep so well anymore. But I think it will be an individual thing, but it will be worth to I think tune in with yourself and think what works for you in terms of sleep and when you feel rested, and also look after your sleep hygiene. But in terms of work, I'm sure again it's a very tricky thing to answer, because we all work in different ways, and I think it's a balance. That's something that you would probably need to figure out for yourself. The only suggestion I would make would be that time for the personal time. Again, I won't be suggesting the specific number of hours, but I think this time for checking in with yourself and building awareness about how you feel, and also maybe bigger questions like direction of life. You know, am I being happy with where I am right now? So they're not always easy questions to explore, but I think it's worth making time for that.
Thank you, Joanna. So another question, somebody said about what's the book called? I think the book that you've got on your bedside table.
Okay, I will, gosh, what's the title? 1 second. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay, Silence, the Power of Quiet in a World Full of Noise.
Okay, so
The Power of Quiet in the World Full of Noise.
Lovely, thank you, Joanna. So I want to come back to another question that came up. I want to ask.
Sorry, I've got a small person here. I'll be right back.
No problem. This is all about. No problem. Okay. If anybody's got any comments that they want to raise just while Joanna's sorting out her lockdown. Oh, here she is. She's back. Thanks, Joanna. This is what is very normal these days: dogs barking, children. So you mentioned about time blocking. What have you got any advice on what amount of time you would recommend to concentrate on kind of monotasking? I mean, I'm sure it's about, you know, what task we have to achieve, but what time would you recommend to concentrate on kind of monotasking?
Mm-hmm. So basically, in terms of the time that can be allocated to one task, there are different productivity theories out there. And some productivity specialists say no longer than 40 minutes. Then there is another interesting technique called Pomodoro Technique that you might want to check.
That's just been raised, funny enough, on the chat. That's interesting.
There you go.
There we go.
So actually, would somebody like to tell us a little bit more about the Pomodoro Technique? Because that's an interesting one.
Annie, the floor is yours.
The Pomodoro Technique is basically you utilize a timer to create focused pockets of work. The suggestion is nothing longer than 25 minutes, after which you take a 5-minute break. After 3 Pomodoro sessions, you then take a longer 15 to 20-minute break to give yourself an opportunity just to take your head out of the space that it's been, whether you've been monotasking on one particular project over those 3 sessions, or whether you've been going from, for example, writing a blog on one thing to dealing with some social media posts to whatever it is. But it gives you an enforced brain break. Yes. And it's been found that we do not have the capacity, our attention span is limited So we actually benefit from taking that brain break, just to allow ourselves to come back to ourselves, to find those moments of inspiration that sometimes come when you stop doing something rather than pushing through constantly.
Thank you, Annie. That's really brilliant.
Annie,
Joanne, anything to add?
very interesting point. I think about, the 25-minute brackets, first of all, Annie, so much shorter than perhaps suggested by other sources. And then, as you said, making the time to reflect and pause, because that's when some ingenious ideas might be coming to our minds, so we have time to digest. I love your backdrop, Annie. That would be my favorite room.
So another question is, and I am very guilty of this, especially when at home, of filling the silence, in the kitchen, preparing dinner, lunch, having the radio on, going for a walk, listening to something, podcasts, which our keynote speaker recommended, which I also love, but it's always filling the silence. So how do you mentioned that silence leads to creativity. How do you encourage weaning off the noise and trying to encourage silence?
This is where I think awareness is the first step, because if our attention can be drawn to the importance of silence, I would think that we will find those moments at different times of the day for all of us. So as opposed to forcing yourself into an armchair, locking yourself into a room and saying, that's my silent time, I think that would be maybe a little bit too regimented. But for me, I think those moments, so I like running. I cannot always run. Some injuries stop me from running sometimes. So I walk in the morning. And what I have learned is that when I started paying closer attention to nature, but actually the detail of nature. So stopping looking at leaves, I know it sounds a bit crazy, but actually when I started looking at the detail of nature or flowers, I found it really relaxing and actually quite creativity boosting. And then I checked it, I researched the power of actually looking at nature, in zooming into nature, so to speak. So for example, studying the way the leaves are, different patterns on them. And actually that is actually proven scientifically to boost well-being. So maybe the creativity in my case is the afterthought. But of course, these things can be done in silence. That's why, there are walking and running, silent running clubs, silent walking clubs. I think there is one in the suburb, run by a lady I know, and that was her idea for many years. We walk through the heath in silence, and silent retreats. There you go. We can pay a lot of money to go to India and be silent for 3 days. Things we pay
I hope
for.
one day we'll be able to go somewhere exotic like that.
So I think, Jo, it's an interesting one, and I think knowing that, having it on the back of your mind will help us find those moments.
And thank you. No, that's really good. In fact, I know from reading the paper that looking at nature, you're in very good company, because David Attenborough, the infamous David Attenborough, also said 10 minutes of spending time and looking at nature. So he literally just said that very recently, Joanna. So that's if you're endorsing what he says, then that must be a really good tip. I've just had a nice comment here from Michelle Bamberg, who says also sitting for too long is also not so good for joints and muscles. And we're all guilty, especially at the moment, of sitting too much at work. And so using a timer is a good idea for kind of setting up and stretching, which we're all going to need to do in a minute before the next session. So thanks for that, Michelle. We've also had a comment from James. Are red/blue light glasses effective, and how long do you recommend wearing them during the red day evening? Do you know anything about that, Joanne?
I have to disappoint you, James. Very interesting question, and maybe there is someone in the room who knows.
We have an optician. Karen, please unmute yourself.
There you go.
Hello everybody. Yes, they're very useful. They're not red/blue, as James has put. They are for your glasses. When you get offered a multi anti-reflection coating, there is one that also has the blue light filter. And so it will be on your glasses all the time. So even televisions emit this blue light, but you're further away usually. So the research has now turned around. There was a time when Boots, for example, as a chemist shop, were taken to court because they were selling this blue filter to everybody. And there was a time when they suggested in research, really, is this the case? But now it's turned around and it is the case. As Joanna said, it interferes with your melatonin sleep cycle, so it interrupts your sleep. And in answer to James's question, you just wear them all the time because that's how they're made. If you're turning it on your device, by all means, just put it in night mode in the evening. And again, as Joanna says, particularly for children, try and stay away from devices for half an hour before bed.
Thank you, Karen. That's great. And we're coming to 11:15, and I really am very aware that I think we all need 15 minutes before the 15 or kind of 10 minutes before the next session, just to have a stretch, as Michelle advised, and a comfort break. Karen rightly said, for those of us who are living alone in lockdown, sometimes we do need noise, which is also true, Karen. So also a good point. I just want to say thank you very, very much to Joanna. If anybody's got any final questions, we've probably got time for one more question. If anybody's got, I wanted to know how you recommend we challenge our phone habits, because we really do go around and about with our phone every day. Is there any way we can challenge those phone habits, just as a final point before I stop the session?
Thank you. So that's a good question. So my challenge to you is to analyze your apps today on your phone. Decide which ones are not essential. Take them off your phone and access them on your desktop only. So some sources recommend a 30-day activity like this, shock horror. Some sources recommend 60 days to form a habit. But bottom line, even if you do it for a few days, it will be interesting for you to see if you take them off your phone and you have to log into your PC to actually check on those apps, how essential they are in your life. I think that would be a good exercise.
Really thought-provoking. Thank you so much, Joanna, and thanks for everybody for joining the session. We really appreciate it. If anybody's got any last comments, please unmute. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you at the 11:30 session. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate
Thanks very much, Joanna.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I was just going to say I've got the blue light glasses and I wear them, and